Retirement. A time when you can put your feet up and look back on a career well spent. All of your worries have floated away and all that's left is golf, cruises and spending time with the grandkids. Or at least that's what we think will happen. The reality is that for most people, the traditional retirement lifestyle that we see in movies is nothing but a pipe dream. And when I say most people, I'm talking about you. In many countries, the average worker isn't on track for a financially comfortable retirement. And globally, we need to make up $400 trillion worth of retirement savings by 2050 if we're to avoid an outright retirement crisis. Sounds pretty scary, right? Luckily, this is something you have control over. You can have the golf and the cruises provided you make the most of your pension, because your pension is the key to a happy retirement. And in this video, I'm going to tell you 10 pension mistakes you need to avoid in order to secure your dream retirement. Let's quickly recap on pensions because there's lots of misconceptions about what they actually are. The word pension really just refers to the pool of money which you've set aside for retirement purposes over the course of your working life. The difference between a pension and money in your bank account is that the money in your pension is invested in what could be a wide variety of different assets. So over time, you put money into your pension and that money is invested in the hope that when you reach retirement, the total value of your pension will have grown to an amount that can support your lifestyle, whereas money in a bank account typically doesn't grow substantially over time. If you're familiar with the process of investing in stocks, ETFs, or even crypto, pensions operate in the same way. You put money into an investment account and that money is invested. The difference is that with a pension, you can't access the money until you reach retirement. With that in mind, let's discuss the most common pension mistakes. Number 1, not starting your pension early enough. One of the biggest misconceptions about pensions is that they're only for old people, and honestly, it's not hard to see why. It's always going to be older individuals who are taking benefits from their pension, and on that basis, you might assume that pensions aren't relevant to you when you're young. However, this couldn't be further from the truth. The reason why is compound interest. Remember, a pension is nothing but an investment account that's specifically used for retirement purposes. Therefore, the basic principles of investing are equally as applicable to pensions as they are to investing in stocks or ETFs via your online brokerage account. One such principle is compound interest. Put simply, compound interest is where your investment returns start earning you even more investment returns. And this is the key to building up a very sizable pension for retirement. Let's take an example. Say we invest $1,000 into a pension fund which pays an annual dividend of 5%. At the end of year 1, our investment will have grown to $1,050, i.e. the $1,000 initial investment plus a dividend of $50. Pretty simple, but here's where compound interest comes in. The dividend of $50 is automatically reinvested back into the pension. Now in the second year, our annual dividend of 5% will be paid based on an investment amount of $1,050. So in effect, our dividend is now earning us even more dividends, with year 2's dividend growing slightly to $52.50. This is a classic example of compound interest, and even though it might not seem substantial, over 30 or 40 years, the effect of compound interest is exceptional. In this next example, we're assuming that you invest $500 per month into your pension and you do so for 40 years. That's a pretty reasonable assumption for a proactive retirement investor, as it assumes that you start in your 20s and that you stay consistent with your investments until your 60s, when you'd likely consider retiring. Assuming an 8% annual return on investment, you'd end up with a pension valued at $1.5 million. Not bad, right? But look what happens if we delay our pension investments until our 30s. With just 10 less years to avail of the effects of compound interest, our pension value has shrunk by 56% to $679,000. As you can see from the graph, in the early years of the investment, there is very little happening in terms of growth. But as we get later and later into the life of the investment, the growth becomes exponential. That's compound interest. The point is that in order to create a large pension, you need to start as early as possible to take advantage of compound interest. Putting it off for just a few years can have a massive impact on your results. So while it might be older people who receive pension benefits in retirement, the work to secure those benefits started decades prior, and you need to get started on that work as soon as possible. Number 2, not investing enough in your pension. As important as starting early generally is to pension success, it's a pointless endeavor without sufficient investment amounts. The most surefire way to ensure that you won't have enough money to maintain your standard of living in retirement is to not scale the size of your investments over time. The reality is that people are living longer, with over 65 set to double by 2050. We're going to see more people than ever before living comfortably into their 90s and even 100s. While that's certainly a good thing, what many people fail to realize is that you'll need to pay for all those extra years in retirement. The more time you spend retired, the more money you'll need to pay for it. While the exact amount of money required will vary from person to person, it's wise to not underestimate just how much you'll need to invest. Many countries operate a system of pensions auto-enrollment, whereby a predetermined minimum percentage of your salary is invested into a pension when you start work. One of the worst things you can do is to assume that this amount is sufficient to cover what you'll require in retirement. It's not. Instead, what you should be doing is aiming to get as close as possible to the maximum permissible pension investment amount each year, as specified by the rules of your country. As your salary increases over the course of your career, one of your top priorities should be increasing the amount of money which you're investing in your pension. If this isn't prioritized, not only are you limiting your pension's potential, but you're also outright running the risk of not having enough money in retirement. Number 3, not managing your pension investments. Putting money towards your pension is the first step, but deciding what to invest that money in is the second step. How valuable your pension is when you reach retirement is ultimately going to depend on the performance of the investments which you've made, or in some cases, the performance of the investments which were made on your behalf. Knowing what to invest your pension in and making those investments is critically important. Why? Because not all investments provide the same returns over time. And if you're invested in assets which provide low returns, you'll find that when you reach retirement, your money hasn't grown enough. So that begs the question, what should you be investing your pension in? The answer to that question is going to depend on your own personal circumstances, as well as your attitude towards and tolerance for risk. Generally speaking, the younger you are, the more risk you can afford to take on. In the case of pension investments, that might look something like getting more exposure to stocks in your younger years, and then slowly transitioning to safer investments like bonds and cash in your later years. However, there are no written rules, and that's why it's generally advisable to work alongside a pensions advisor when trying to figure out what's best for you. But what is a written rule is knowing what your pension is invested in and being confident that those investments make sense in the context of where you're at in your life. Number 4, not searching for value. One factor that many people fail to consider when it comes to their pension is the fees and charges that they're paying for the privilege of their pension existing. As with most things in the world, nothing comes without cost, and a pension is no different. Generally speaking, in most countries, any fees and charges associated with pension investments will come about either going into the pension, in the pension, or coming out of the pension, or indeed a combination of some or all of these. Fees and charges have a very significant impact on investment returns over 30 or 40 years, and your objective as an investor should be to minimize the amount of fees and charges which you're paying. Otherwise, you risk giving up a large chunk of your retirement savings when it could have been avoided. Let's take an example. Here we're assuming that we're investing $5,000 each year for 40 years at an 8% rate of return. The cost associated with this investment is 0.5% per year. After 40 years, our investment without fees would have grown to nearly 1.4 million, but we only get 1.2 million because this little figure of 0.5% translated into over 177,000 worth of fees. Watch what happens if we increase the fees to 1.5%. Now we only end up with 935,000, and our fees have ballooned by over 160% to 463,000. So even though an extra 1% in fees might seem like a small amount, over 40 years it has a massive impact on our investment returns and the value of our pensions. Of course, it's not always going to be possible to pay the lowest fees on the market, especially if high fees are associated with the types of investments that you want to make within your pension. However, it's essential that you at least take some time to shop around and see whether better bang for your buck exists elsewhere. Maybe a different pension provider offers better value, or perhaps one particular pension fund is cheaper than another. At least make the effort to satisfy yourself that you're getting the best possible value on the market. Number 5, not diversifying your pension. As with all investments, diversification is very important. Diversification is another way of saying don't put all of your eggs in one basket. And just like how it's important when investing in stocks or ETFs, it's equally as important when it comes to your pension. Diversification is important because it reduces the risk of your pension being severely impacted by the underperformance of a given asset class or individual investment. There's two ways of looking at this. First off, we can diversify our pensions by investing in multiple different types of asset classes. Instead of just investing in stocks, bonds, or property, we can invest in all of these, and we can vary the weighting of each within our portfolios over time as we see fit. To use our example from earlier, we might start off at a younger age with a greater weighting towards stocks because we can afford to take on more risk. But as we get older, we might reallocate some of our stock investments towards bonds, property, or cash. Point being, we're not invested solely in one asset class at any given time, and that's diversification. The second way of looking at diversification is in relation to the sources of cash which you plan on relying on in retirement. Many people have intentions to rely on their property as a source of cash in retirement, idea being that you sell the property and downsize to a cheaper location. Other people may be banking on an inheritance of property, cash, or other assets to fund their retirement. But the fact of the matter is that you shouldn't rely too heavily on any one given source of cash for retirement. Instead, just like how you diversify within your pension, you should try and add as many income streams as possible to your overall retirement plan. Maybe you'll rely on a combination of your pension, your property, personal savings and investments, and inherited assets if you're lucky. Number 6, not taking advantage of employer matching. So this is a big one. Many employers will actually match whatever you decide to invest into your pension, usually subject to certain limits. For example, say your salary is $60,000 per year and you decide to invest 5% into a pension. 5% of $60,000 is $3,000 invested for the year. Now, if your employer offers to match that investment, what that means is that they'll put an additional $3,000 into your pension for free, on top of the salary that they're already paying you. In effect, you're getting free money for deciding to invest in your pension, and this is money which you wouldn't have had otherwise. It is shocking how many employees don't know that their employers offer pension matching, and it's equally shocking how many don't know just how valuable it is, especially over 30 or 40 years. In fact, let's work it out. $3,000 invested every year for 40 years at an 8% return is $777,000. But let's say our employer matches our investment of $3,000 with $3,000 of their own. Now we're investing $6,000 per year, and after 40 years, we end up with $1.5 million. So yeah, employer matching is pretty damn valuable. So what you should do is ask your employer whether or not they offer pension matching. If they do, ask them up to what percentage of your salary they'll match. At a minimum, you should try to invest however much into your pension, which will allow you to take advantage of the full matching benefit that your employer offers. That way, you're making the most of what is literally the closest you'll ever come to free money. And when you realize that you could have 30 plus years of retirement to pay for, you'll want to take any help you can get. Number 7, not understanding the limitations of state support. One of the biggest mistakes that people make when it comes to retirement planning is assuming that their government will look after them throughout their old age. The reality is that state pension systems almost everywhere should not be relied upon. As we mentioned earlier, people are living longer. By 2050, there will be a significant imbalance between the number of people in retirement and the number of new workers entering the workforce. Most state pension systems operate on the basis that the workers of today pay for the retirement of the retirees of today. They do so in the hope that when they reach retirement, the workers of the future will pay for their retirement. But this only works if there's a good balance between workers and retirees. When there's an imbalance, the entire system becomes unsustainable, and policymakers are left with three choices. A, increase the contributions which workers are paying towards the state pension system. B, reduce the benefits associated with the state pension. Or C, increase the age at which individuals become entitled to the state pension. None of these choices choices are favourable, and for political reasons, changes may not be introduced at all in order to save face. For that reason, many state pension systems are starting to look like state-sponsored Ponzi schemes. Long story short, state pension benefits are far from guaranteed, especially for younger generations. This makes it even more important to be on track with your own personal pension investments. Number 8, not being tax efficient. Up until now, you might have been asking yourself, why would I ever choose to invest in my pension when I could just invest myself using an online broker? And that way, I wouldn't have to wait until retirement to access my cash. Equally, why would you invest in your pension when you could just enjoy the cash you have today? Fortunately, policymakers have thought of this, and in order to encourage you to invest in your pension for retirement, in most countries, pension investing is made to be extremely tax efficient. In other words, there are lots of tax benefits associated with investing in your pension. The way in which you receive these tax benefits is going to be different from country to country, but generally speaking, tax benefits are awarded going into the pension, in the pension, and coming out of the pension. If for nothing else, reducing your tax bill is reason enough to invest in your pension. By choosing to do so, you're keeping more money in your pocket and less in the tax man's. The value of these tax benefits over 30 or 40 years can be in the hundreds of thousands, and the earlier you start availing of them, the greater the benefit becomes. Number 9, not knowing your retirement options. Say you've done all the hard work to ensure that your pension value is large enough to support you in retirement. What happens when you actually retire? Many new retirees find themselves in a state of confusion trying to figure out how best to take their retirement benefits. Understanding your options for drawing down your pension benefits is critically important because you need to ensure that you're choosing the correct option which will facilitate your needs. After all, you want to avoid running out of money. Every country has different rules, but generally speaking, there are a number of universal options for taking retirement benefits. You typically take a tax-free lump sum, and then with the remainder, you can take it as cash, you can purchase an annuity, or you can reinvest it. It's virtually never a good idea to take all of your pension as cash, because once it's gone, it's gone. So your real decision is going to be whether to purchase an annuity or whether to reinvest your pension into a retirement-specific investment account. With an annuity, you get a guaranteed annual income for life in exchange for some or all of the total value of your pension. Annuities can be good if you're someone who is looking for certainty around how much money you'll receive each year in retirement. Essentially, with an annuity, you're insuring yourself against the risk of outliving your retirement savings. But annuities also have downsides. For example, depending on the annuity rate which you're offered, you can receive a not so favorable deal, and the amount of money which you receive each year can be quite low. Annuities are also susceptible to the effects of inflation, given that the income which you're receiving is fixed. So as inflation rises, the real value of your annual annuity income goes down. That's why it's often wise to keep your pension invested in retirement. Many countries continue to offer tax incentives throughout retirement for staying invested. Plus, if your pension is invested, it has the potential to grow at a rate that is faster than the rate of inflation, thereby protecting the real value of your money. Of course, nothing is guaranteed, and you run the risk of outliving your retirement savings if your annual withdrawals are considerably larger than the growth of your investments. So it's about weighing up your options. Annuities are a nice conservative option where you can get guaranteed income for life, and if you happen to live for 30 plus years in retirement, that can be quite valuable. On the other hand, investing your pension gives you the opportunity to grow your annual income far in excess of what an annuity could provide. But again, that's not guaranteed. Number 10, not having conversations about your pension. Perhaps the biggest mistake that everyone has made when it comes to their pension is not talking about it earlier. Normalizing conversations around retirement planning is the first step towards ensuring that we as future retirees have enough money set aside to support us. Many people wait until their 40s or 50s before they even start thinking about their pension, let alone talk about it. But as we've discussed, optimizing your pension investments from a young age is critical to building up a sizable retirement pot. But how can we expect young people to start early when they don't have any of the information? If you're watching this and you're in your 20s or 30s, first off, congratulations, you're miles ahead of the pack. But second, I would encourage you to take what you've learned today and bring it to your friend group. Start the conversation, ask the important questions, because ultimately, retirement planning is important for each and every one of us. Governments and financial institutions aren't doing enough, and so the responsibility falls on us. But I want to hear from you. Have you started investing in your pension? If not, not, I'd love to hear what you think is holding you back. If you have, let me know what your plan is going forward with your pension investments. Leave it all down below in the comments and I'll get back to each and every comment posted. So I really do hope you enjoyed the video here today. As always, if you did enjoy the video, please do let me know in the comment section below. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.